Halloween by Rabbie Burns. Upon that night when fairies light on Castle's Downings dance, or o'er the lays in splendid blaze on sprightly coursers prance, or for Colleen the rout is ta'en beneath the moon's pale beams, there up the cove to stray and rove, among the rocks and streams to sport that night. Among the bonny winding banks where Doon rins wimpling clear, where Bruce aince ruled the martial ranks and shook his carrack spear, some merry friendly country folks together did convene to burn their knits and poo their stocks and hoard their Halloween, fu blithe that night. The lassies' feet and cleanly neat, mair braw than when they're fine, their faces blithe fu sweetly kythe, hearts leal and warm and kin. The lads say trig wi wooer babs, weel knotted on their garten, some unco blate and some way gabs, gar lasses' hearts gan startin, whiles fast that night. Then, first and foremost through the kail, their stocks mauna be sought aince, they steek their een and grape and whale for muckleanes and straitains. Poor Haverel Will fell off the drift, and wandered through the bowkail, and powed for want o' better shift. A runt was like a sow-tail, sae bowed that night. Then, straught or crooked, yerd or nane, they roar and cry and trowther. The very wee things toddlin' ring, wi' stocks out o'er their shouther, and gif the caustics, sweet or sour, wi' jot legs they taste them, sign cosily aboon the door, wi' canny care they've placed them, to lie that night. The lassies staw frae mang them a, to poo their stalks o' corn, but the Rab slips out and jinks about, behint the muckle thorn. He grippit Nelly hard and fast, loud skirled a the lasses, but their tap pickle maist was lost, wi' cootlin i' the fowshoose, wi' him that night. The a guidwifes well hooded knits are round and round divided, and mony lads and lasses' fates are there that night decided. Some kindle couthie side by side, and burn thegither trimly. Some start awa wi' saucy pride, and jump out o'er the chimley, fu high that night. Jean slips in twa, wi' tenty ee, wha twas she was na tell, but this is Jock, and this is me, she says into hersel. He bleezed o'er her, and she o'er him, as they wad never mair part, till fuff he started up the lum, and Jean had e'en a sair hurt, to seat that night. Poor Willie, wi' his bowkail runt, was brunt wi' primsy Mally, and Mary, nae doubt, took the drunt to be compared to Willie. Mal's knit lap out wi' prideful fling, and her ain fit it burnt it, while Willie lap and swore by Jing 'twas just the way he wanted to be that night. Nell had the fawsoose in her min, she pits herself and Robin. In love and bleeze they sweetly join, till white and ace they're sobbin'. Nell's heart was dancing at the view, she whispered Rob to look for't. Rob, Stownlands, pried her bonny moo, fu cosy in the Newfort, unseen that night. But Merrin sat behind their backs, her thoughts on Andrew Bell. She lees them gashin' at their cracks, and slips out by hersel. She throw the yard the nearest tacks, and to the kiln she goes then, and Darklin grappit for the box, and in the blue clew throws them, right feared that night. And aye she wint, and aye she swat, I wat she made nae jokin, till something held within the pat, good Lord, but she was quakin'. But whether 'twas the deil himsel, or whether 'twas a bowkin, or whether it was Andrew Bell, she didna wait on talkin', to speer that night. Wee Jenny to her granny says, "Will ye go wi' me, granny? I'll eat the apples at the glass I got frae Uncle Johnny." She fuffed her pipe wi' sic a lunt, in wrath she was sae vaprin. She noticed na an aisle brunt, her braw new worset apron out through that night. "Ye little skelpy limmer's face, I dare ye try sic sportin', as seek the foul thief ony place for him to spay your fortune. Nae doubt but ye may get a sight, great cause ye hae to fear it, for mony a ane has gotten a fright, and lived and died to lear it, on sic a night. Hirst afore the Shire Moor, I mind as will's yestreen. I was a gulpy then, I'm sure, I wasna past 15. The simmer had been call and rat, and stuff was unco green, and I a rantin' curn we gat, and just on Halloween it fell that night. Our stibble rig was Rab McGrain, a clever sturdy fellow. His sin gat eppy sim wi' Wayne that lived in Achmacalla. He gat hemp seen a minded weel, and he made unco light o't, but mony a day was by himsel, and he was safe sairly frighted that verra night. Then up gat fechten Jamie Fleck, and he swore by his conscience that he could saw hemp seed a peak, for it was a but nonsense. The auld goodman wrought down the poke, and out the hand forgied him, syne bade him slip frae mang the folk, some time when nae seed him, and tried that night. He marches through among the stacks, though he was something startin'. He grape he for a harrow tax, and hurls at his kirpin. And every now and then he says, Hemp seed, I saw thee, and her that is to be my lass, come after me and draw thee, as fast this night. He whistled up to Lord Lennox March to keep his courage cheery, although his hair began to arch, he was sae flayed and eerie, till presently he hears a squeak, and then a grain and gruntle, he by a shoother gae a keek, and tumbled wi a wintle out ower that night. He rode a horrid murder shout in dreadful desperation, and young and all come rinnin' out and hear the sad narration. He swore 'twas Hilchin Jean Macraw or Crouchy Merrin Humphy, till stop, she trotted through them a', and wha was it but Grumphy, a steer that night. Meg fain wad to the barn gain, to win 3 wechs o' nothing, but for to meet the deal her lane she pat but little faith in. She gies the herd a pickle nits and 2 red cheeked apples, to watch while for the barn she sets, and hopes to see Tam Kimples that very night. She turns the key wi' canny thraw, and o'er the threshold ventures, but first on Sawney gies a ca', syne bodily in she enters. A rattin rattled up the wa', and she cried Lord preserve her, and ran through midden hole and a', and prayed with zeal and fervour, fu fast that night. They hoyt out well, wi' sair advice, they hecht him some fine browing. It chanced the stack he faddened thrice, was timmer prompt for throwing. He taks a swirly old moss oak, for some black gruesome carlin, and loot a winds and drew a stroke, till skin and blipes came hurlin', aff Neves that night. A wanton widow Leesie was, as canny as a kittlin, but och, that night among the shaws, she gat a fearfu' settlin'. She through the winds and by the cairn, and o'er the hill gied screevin', where 3 laird's lands meet at a burn, to dip her left sark sleeve in, was bent that night. Whiles o'er a linn the burnie plays, as through the glen it wimpled, whiles round a rocky scaur it strays, whiles in a whale it dimpled, whiles glittered to the nightly rays, wi' bickering, dance and dazzle, whiles cook it underneath the braes, below the spreading hazel, unseen that night. Among the brackens on the brae, between her and the moon, the deil or else an outler kay gat up and gae a croon. Poor Leesie's heart maist lap the hool, never lavrock height she jumpit, but missed a fit, and in the pool, out o'er the lug she plumpit, wi' a plunge that night. In order, on the clean hearth-stane the luggies 3 are ranged, and every time great care is ta'en to see them duly changed. Auld Uncle Jock, wha wedlock's joys, syne Mars year did desire, because he gat the tomb dish thrice, he heaved them on the fire, in wrath that night. Wi' merry sangs and friendly cracks, I wat they didna weary, and uncouth tales and funny jokes their sports were cheap and cheery, till buttered sounds wi' fragrant lunt set other gabs a steerin', syne wi' a social glass o' strunt they parted off, careerin', fu blithe that night.